Good morning, students. Today I am going to discuss about the topic primary key of a table. So let's start with this topic called primary key. A primary key is a minimal combination of fields that uniquely identifies a record in a table. Now consider this table in this slide. The name of this table is student device. This table consists of the fields SID, SNAME, SCT, DID, DNAME till PUR date. Now which out of these fields do you think can uniquely identify every record in the table called student device? Now see, the field SNAME cannot uniquely identify every record in this table. This is because there can be identical names. For example, there can be two students having the same name. Let's say if the first student Arpita belongs to the city Bangalore, then there can be another student bearing the same name Arpita. Now let me modify this asterisk to Arpita. Now this becomes a table having two students bearing the same name Arpita, but both of these students are different because the first student bearing the name Arpita belongs to the city Bangalore, whereas the second student bearing the name Arpita belongs to the city Cochin. Since names are identical here for this field SNAME, so SNAME cannot uniquely identify every record in this table called student device. Now again, consider this field SCT. Let's say, for example, the student bearing the name Arpita who lives in the city Cochin has relocated to a different city for some reason. Let's say she has relocated to Bangalore. Now let me modify this Cochin to Bangalore. As a result, this becomes a table where the field SCT holds identical values. That is, the identical values are Bangalore. So even SCT cannot identify every records in this table student device uniquely. Now for the rest of the fields, C for DID, it contains identical values, D10 occurring twice. Again, the device name or the D name, here it has RAM which is occurring twice. So none of these fields starting from SNAME, SCT, DID till PUR date can uniquely identify every record in this table student device. So we are now left with only one field, that is SID. SID denotes the ID of the student, or we can say the student ID. For every student there is a unique ID. That means the ID for one student has to be different from the other. Now in case, consider the scenario where there are two students bearing the same name Arpita, then how can you distinguish between these two students bearing the same name Arpita? This can be done by assigning unique values of SID to each of the students bearing the same name Arpita. Let's say for the first student bearing the name Arpita, the unique SID which is assigned to her is S10, and the second student bearing the name Arpita has been assigned the unique value of SID, that is S30. In this way, the field SID can uniquely identify two different students bearing the same name. In addition to that, for the student named Tushar, the field SID also assigns a unique value, that is S20, to him. As a result, now we have seen that this field SID can uniquely identify all the student names. And once this is possible, the same field student ID can uniquely identify every record of this table named student device. As a result, this field SID has become a primary key for this table student device. So SID acts as the primary key as it uniquely identifies every record in the table student device. Now one more thing, just keep in mind that these fields are also known by the name attributes. That means we can refer to a field by the name attribute. Now see the second point, the fields of a primary key is known as prime attributes. That means for this table named student device, if SID is the primary key of this table, then SID is the field which is the prime attribute. Now consider this table called purchase in this slide. This table consists of the fields or the attributes name, date of birth, DID, DNAME, DCost till PUR date. Now if you look at these fields or these attributes, you will notice that the first field with the name bearing identical values of Arpita cannot be a primary key. So we can be sure of it that the field name cannot uniquely identify every record in this table purchase. So this field, that is name, cannot become the primary key of this table purchase. But if we combine these two fields, that is name and date of birth, together, then it is possible to identify every record uniquely in this table purchase. This is because even though the names are identical, their date of births are not identical. You can see for the field called name, the first element, that is Arpita, is having the date of birth 29/1990, whereas the second element, which is also Arpita, for the field name has the date of birth 17/5/1991. So if both these fields are combined together, this forms a unique entry, and the combined fields name and date of birth can uniquely identify every record in this table purchase. That's why name and date of birth taken together forms the primary key for this table purchase. So the combination of the fields name and date of birth acts as the primary key, as it uniquely identifies every record in the table. Now can you identify which are the prime attributes or the prime fields in this table called purchase? The prime attributes are those attributes which is the part of a primary key. Now we have two fields which are the part of a primary key. Those are name and date of birth. So these two fields, that is name and date of birth, are the prime attributes. Now there is one more point. When primary key is a combination of more than one fields, it is also called as composite key. Now if you look at this table called purchase, the primary key consists of two different fields. That is why this primary key can also be said as the composite key. But if you refer to this table student device, there is only one primary key, and this primary key has only one field, that is SID. Now since composite key should be a combination of more than one fields, so this particular primary key having only one field is not a composite key. But for this table purchase, since this primary key consists of more than one fields, that is the first field name is name and the second field name is date of birth, that is why this primary key is said to be a composite key. Now come to the fourth point. A null value in a table is a value in a field that appears to be blank. Now consider this table named student personnel. This table called student personnel consists of a primary key which is SID, and this field consists of a value which appears to be blank. The first two entries are filled with SIDs as S10 and S20, but the third entry appears to be blank. Now the question is this acceptable? Now read the last point. The values of prime attributes can never be null. Now which are those prime attributes? The attributes or the fields of a primary key are known as the prime attributes. Now since this field SID is a primary key, so it is a prime attribute. But prime attributes cannot contain null values, or it cannot contain values that appears to be blank. That is why this is not acceptable here. As primary key should uniquely identify every record in a particular table, so putting a blank value for a primary key field will not allow it to uniquely identify every record in the table student personnel. And that is why blank values for a primary key field is not acceptable, or we can say that null values for a primary key field is not acceptable.